that's why, was Comenius up to that roughly? Or
Yeah.
is he right? So because he's also in kind of a prefigurative context, right? Because
Well, he was in exactly that. So basically Mead was saying, like, usually in kind of, what we might call pre-modern or whatever, it would be prefigurative or configurative, but sometimes warfare or major ecological change would force a culture to migrate, in which case they would go to a new terrain where the elders didn't know what to do and the youth had to take over. So it occurred in history that you'd get occasionally thrown into a context of needing to become a prefigurative culture, more or less. And so because of the technological and economic changes in Comenius's time, there was exactly a situation where you couldn't trust the youth to be educated by the Catholics or the Protestants, because they would just be propagandized, right? And you couldn't trust the epistemologies of the Catholics or the Protestants, because there was this new natural science that was emerging since the Renaissance, which kind of was starting to undermine a lot of that epistemology. So you couldn't even pass down intelligibility-wise, how does the storm work? How do you navigate the ocean? How do you deal with disease? Like, there were plagues and things in those days. So that's one of the reasons it's so interesting. It was that time between worlds becomes radically prefigurative. But then it restabilizes when you get the kind of, Westphalia and kind of like the move into what we think of as modernity, kind of reworlded, but in the context of rapidly changing acceleration of technologies. And so we ended up creating a society that was systematically accelerating its ability to undermine itself and got to a situation where we're now in a kind of perpetually prefigurative state, potentially. Or at least in the near term, you can't see it.
We're in a perpetually prefigurative state. Wow, I see what you mean. And what's coming to mind is, and I know you may have mixed feelings about Greta Thunberg as such, but there are these iconic moments where she's on stage in front of the UN saying, "You have failed my generation. You don't understand," which is sort of quintessentially younger generation telling older generation, "You don't know what to do. We have to learn how to do it and show you," in a sense. Nothing she's right, but for what it's worth, it's an interesting illustration.
Well, and she's a great example, and not necessarily in a good direction, because the other eventuality of this pattern is generational warfare, where the generations take up purely strategic relationships to one another. And that's a recipe for civilizational collapse. Basically, you could almost argue that all civilizational collapses eventuate in something like intergenerational warfare, because it ends up being a situation where the change is so abrupt, and the obviously kind of decomposing civilization built by the elders is so problematic. There were some Marxists actually who thought that you would get an inevitability of intergenerational warfare as a sublimation of class warfare. And if you look at the situation today, it's interesting, right? Like, not really many baby boomers have a lot of cryptocurrency. A lot of young people have a lot of cryptocurrency. Not many baby boomers understand things like DAOs and distributed autonomous organizations and all of that stuff. So there's this basic play for all the marbles that's occurring at a intergenerational level. And so the boomer kind of dismissing of the boomers, and also you're privileged but stuck up and spoiled millennial, like, that's generational warfare. With not a prefigurative culture. A prefigurative culture, if you get it right, is actually a deep, profound collaboration between elder and youth,
which is what
knowing that we need one another, and not knowing exactly what that relationship is going to look like, but being willing to cooperate in the face of the unknown across varying asymmetries of knowledge and capacity depending on context. So it's a disposition towards intergenerational cooperation, as opposed to cross-generational resentment and warfare, which is what we're kind of moving towards now.
So that's another educational imperative. It's baked in.